Ooh, let's see what we have this evening. Well, this isn't going to be controversial at all. So a few days ago, I stumbled across an essay called In Defense of Colonization by Bruce Gilley. Fun read. And being that I am the offspring of the colonial era, being South African and all, and in the spirit of mainly my own amusement, I have some questions that I'm sure would make some people very uncomfortable. So, with regards to the colonial territories, let's take Africa for example, right? East Coast, wherever. Let's say we have a bunch of tribes, different identities, because not all people are the same based on their skin color. No, naturally that would be quite racist of us. So we have our tribes, settlements, and in the absence of Western things like philosophy, property rights, functional governments and institutions, etc., pray tell, what would be the methodology or mechanism that would settle the inevitable disputes among the tribes? Who or what would be the governing authority? And how would their authority be executed? Pun intended. Because we all know the lefties aren't fans of capitalism, so no private property or capital investment. So what would facilitate and ensure peaceful cooperation in its absence? What exactly would be the fuel that powers or incentivizes good relations among the leaders, however they happen to be chosen? But let's say none of that materializes, hypothetically of course. With regards to historical ties in the people of any given territory, what makes any given land or resource theirs in the absence of a nation state? What would give it credence aside from, say, blood and soil? What authority recognizes this claim, and how can they acknowledge and or defend it? Or is it purely because they can physically defend it against whatever encroaching force treads on their territory? Also, let's say some tribes or factions went to war. It's tribal, so extermination, assimilation of the conquered. Does it become their land now that the former owners, by whatever authority that was established, are now, deceased? And if so, how long must they remain there in order for it to become their land by whatever measure of recognizable authority? In this case, it seems to be time alone. Yet we have no quantifiable measurement that I'm aware of that constitutes ownership via this method, and by who we don't know, in order for the Europeans to do the exact same thing as the previous conquering tribes. But when the Europeans do it, somehow it becomes theft. As if the etiquette post-victory is the same in both cases, regardless of which European nation emerged victorious. Because it seems to me, the people who adhere to the anti-colonial political ideology seem to do so with a very broad continent-based framework, just European versus native. Which does a disservice to both sides, actually, because you're removing all variations in ethnic identities from either continent, which is insane, and you're branding any action done against the natives as a higher moral ill purely on the basis that the offending party is not a born native of that land, which implies any action undertaken by the natives against other natives, no matter how horrendous in nature, will always play second fiddle to any crime done when there's more than one continent involved. And holy shit, I just realized this is how the left views black on black crime. Damn, that was rather eye-opening. Where was I going with this again? Oh, sorry. The reason I always like using the colonial argument is because it's a fun tool to make the lefties spur. There's very few things that show just how stupidly inconsistent their worldview really is, better than their takes on colonization. Claim to care about group identities, unless they aren't progressive, in which case bollocks to them. We saw this during the World Cup. See, Europeans have the most progressive record on human rights, yet they're also the bad guys, with little to no regard or knowledge as to how or why there was this progression in this part of the world to begin with. Colonization bad, but progressivism of the European origin must be spread to hell with local cultural customs. Claim all cultures are equal, yet wants to wipe out anything that is incompatible with the false god that is equality, which proves A, cultures are not equal, and B, equality is utterly unnatural. You can start to see why these people are all mentally unstable now, can't you? The one that does tickle me the most, that they can't seem to grasp, is the fact that different cultures and ways of life develop based on what's around them, like the landscape, the weather, the wildlife, the flora, the food scarcity, the culture and accessibility of other humans around them. A lot of these civilizations are very backwards due to those circumstances. It's nothing to do with their genes or their race or any of that kind of crap. It's because If there's no obstacles that threaten them, if there's no access to a greater wealth of information because the brain pool is limited to the local, there's nothing that propels or provokes a certain group of people to advance. So they don't. Read Thomas Sowell, the single biggest factor that causes stagnation is isolation. So you have these dim-witted Western intellectuals who do not seem to understand, or rather refuse to see, that information or production outside the realm of necessity within a certain cultural paradigm is not always going to be looked at favorably. What's valuable to you in your world is not necessarily of universal appreciation. I'll give an example. Let's say I met a fisherman in some remote village and he's having trouble catching fish. Now I have a machine that can help him, but it's powered by electricity or petrol, and he doesn't have access to those resources, so the machine is quite useless to him. But let's say I can fashion him a special net, and I can teach him to make more of it. All of a sudden, he can now catch 5 times as much fish in a single day, and he becomes the most popular man in the village. For my services, he trades me some shiny little pebble. He doesn't care for it, he has no purpose for it. But when I take it to a jeweler though, I found that it's worth 80 grand. So always keep in mind cultural relevancy and usefulness. My favorite thing that always makes me laugh, they sing glowingly of diversity, but they have none, and any cross-cultural learning does not exist at all in their world. Think of, say an alien lands here, and hypothetically they can communicate with you, and you see them using some insane next-gen tech. Are you going to try and learn from the smartest human about it, or are you going to try and learn from the alien who's actually using the tech? You're going to go with the alien. Duh. And should the alien leave before you've learned how to use it, now it's either redundant or causes problems. This is how the anti-colonial ilk failed to see westernization. The culture that was there was backwards, due to the reasons I just mentioned before. It's not equal to ours. If it was, there would be no need or capacity for the West to colonize, because a city or functioning state would be already present. Not to mention, if you establish colonial settlers there, and some Western pleb thinks these people are being exploited, how would they know the natives don't favor the foreigners because they're better than the local leaders? They wouldn't, because they're not motivated by competence. No, they're motivated by political ideology. Damn be the facts. Look at the places that did not learn from the colonial powers. Their so-called freedom from the colonial powers handed them scathing government corruption, poverty, and often endless war and the total collapse of medical care. This is a preferable alternative to Western imperialism, is it? For some it is, though it does appear they have no problem with endless suffering and hell as long as it isn't the Europeans who are inflicting the damage. I thought about this a while ago. If we were to focus on CRT, we'd solve so many problems. And not critical race theory, that's a load of wank. But if you drop the PC crap, drop the race and politics, all of that bollocks, and you focused on these 3, culture, resources, territory. Holy shit, does so much of human history make far more sense. What did people think and believe? How much and what access to resources did they have? And what was on their territory, its size and its navigational capacity? That is all you need. If you can have an honest and open conversation about those things, you might actually learn a thing or two. And that is all for today. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.